You go. So, good morning. We are continuing with our discussion on the daily Amidah. We are on the blessing of Hashavat Hamishpat, justice, on page 121 or 120. And what we're going to do, if you remember, we just like a quick overview. In the Amidah, we said we have three main subdivisions or subcategories. We have the first three, which are praise, then we have the petitions, and then within the petitions, we saw the progression. First, you need to have intellect, that, and then with that, because you have that, you ask for forgiveness, and then you ask for tshuva, for repentance, to be close back to God, and once you're closer to God, you ask for forgiveness. And once after asking for forgiveness, we ask for redemption. And then moving from that spiritual realm to a little bit more physical realm, we dealt with Refaenu, which is the prayer, the blessing for healing. And after that, the blessing for economic or financial prosperity. And that kind of like concludes that subdivision that we kind of call it on the personal needs, and then we started moving towards the national. So at the end of last week, we started talking about the ingathering of exiles, and we said that this is the first step in that progression, or in this order of things that will show us the order, I guess, it's the order of things that, or the different steps that of the national redemption, let's call it. Okay, so the first one is in gathering us from all the corners of the earth. Yes, Daniel?
Do we have an idea when this prayer was for the first time written?
So we said we don't really know, but it's like it is by the members of the great men of the Great Assembly. We know that, for example, today we're going to deal with Birkat Haminim, but that's a later edition. Okay. There's by the way, we're going to discuss that later. There's a discussion about, for example, Yerushalayim Echa Binyan Yerushalayim and Malchut Beit David. Those two blessings, there's a debate whether that was originally one blessing or two blessings. And so if it was originally one blessing that was split into two, that's something that occurred also later. But generally speaking, we're talking about that period. So we're on page 121 or 20, the second blessing, Hashavat HaMishpat. Okay, so what do we say there? What do we say there in this blessing? Well, we'll see in a second. Restore our judges as at first, and our counselors as at the beginning, and remove from us sorrow and sighing. And you alone, Lord, reign over us with loving kindness and compassion, and vindicate us in justice. Blessed are you, Lord, the King who loves righteousness and justice. So we understand that we can ask about justice. We need to be first in the land of Israel for that to happen. So this is what we asked in the previous bracha. Because only when the Jews are in Israel, and we have a Jewish state. Not necessarily, by the way, there's a whole debate, like, all the Jews, 51%, whatever that is, it really doesn't matter. But you have a Jewish state, then we're talking about we need a system of justice. So it's not going to be an anarchy. And what we're asking here is for the success of the leaders of that state. Just a sec. Terry had a question.
Sorry. So what this is, I had learned once that, or read somewhere, remember, that this second part, the part, the communal part, that this describes a progression towards what Israel will be when Mashiach comes.
That's exactly what I said.
Uh,
This is this the step to the national redemption.
Right, so this is like, like sort of a Jewish, honest, sort of justice should be set up again.
Well, so the question is indeed, we say tzedakah u'mishpat, right? If you look at the Hebrew, so Hashiva shoftenu kevarishona v'yatzenu kevatchila. So we're asking for the shoftim, the judges, as at first, v'yatzenu kevatchila, and also the councils as at the beginning. We need to understand exactly. We need to understand exactly what does it mean. What does it mean? Because if we talk about shoftim, they're not necessarily the greatest time in the history of our nation. So we need to understand that
Like today.
today, yeah. So we need to understand. So we need to understand exactly what does it mean. So first of all, what we're looking at is two processes that are actually happening simultaneously, right? So we're talking about the first is restoring the judges and also the counselors, okay? But we're talking about, it's not necessarily when we say kevarishona and kevatchila, it's not a particular time in history, but rather it's the best time that we have with that, in the best state, whatever that is. You want to say Moshe Rabbeinu, whatever. You want to say the Sanhedrin, it's fine too. Whatever that is, the optimal way in which our court system functions when we flourish. Okay? Time of Shlomo HaMelech, King David, I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point is that that's what we're looking for. And where this is based on, where this is coming from, it's what's the source for Hashiva shoftenu kevarishona v'yatzenu kevatchila, where this is coming from. Anyone knows? Okay, it's a very famous pasuk. It's a very famous pasuk in the beginning of Isaiah. And it says, "V'ashiva shoftayich kevarishona v'yoatzayich kevatchila." So Isaiah teaches us that part of, Isaiah has a prophecy, right? And he talks about when things are going to be good, like the times of redemption. And one of the way he describes that is as the days of old, or whatever that means. And the same goes for the counselors. What is that today? Even then, it's like, look, you have a ruler, you have, in the old days you had David, right? But he had counselors, he had people that he was not a one-person operation, right? We know about Yoav, we know about this, all people that helped him make decisions, make it relevant for today. You have a Knesset parliament, you have something, you have some sort of a system that, so yeah, just a second. So this is kind of like the first, but this is like only the first tier of things. So we're asking God, restore that system, and a system that is going to be functioning in the best way or similar to the best way that it functioned in the past. That's number one. But then there's a shift. Umloch, look at the third line. Umloch aleinu ata Hashem levadcha bechesed v'rachamim v'tzadken v'mishpat. We ask God to reign over us. So what is it? It seems like, in the first glance, it seems like almost like a contradiction. But actually, it's not. It's actually not. Because the way God's kingdom, the way God reign over us, the implementation of that is going to be through the judges and through the counselors, through a judicial system, through a parliament, through prime minister, president, whatever the system is, king, whatever that is. Yes.
So it's like when we had David Melech, right? So he was like our king on earth, but really Hashem was one who ruled.
Correct. It's the same idea. That's what we ask, that the people who have the power today are going to be implementing, executing God's will. Yes, Hannah.
Either I don't understand, but I think it's a contradiction between Shiva Shofenu Kivarashona.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was talking about.
Okay, so I don't understand it.
So I'm saying that the counselors and the judges and all the people in those positions of power are going to implement, are going to execute God's reign, God's will. It's impossible look, when we talk about God reigning over us, this is not going to be in some supernatural way. It's not that everybody is going to have direct communication with God and God's going to tell each one of us what to do, right? You need to have some sort of a system in place. Even when Moshe Rabbeinu, that God communicated with Moshe and Moshe communicated with the people, right? It's the same here. We're going to have a system. We're asking for a system, but we want that system to be aligned with God's will.
But I still think it's a contradictory because in the Pasuk, Shiva Shofenu Umloch Aleinu, in this.
So they can do God's will.
But he is the one actually that is.
Correct. But how that's going to happen in reality? You're going to have a direct line with God. He's going to tell you, pay how much taxes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but we know from history, or maybe I'm talking about it now, after I learned from the history that we had all kinds of shoftim.
Correct.
So,
and some of them, and that's exactly what we want. We want the best of the best. That's exactly what we're asking for. Right?
I hope you don't think that I'm stupid, but maybe when it says, Umloch aleinu ata Hashem levadcha bechesed u'berachamim.
Yeah.
If we said before Hashiva Shoftenu, we listen to the Shoftim. God is not connected to each one of us directly, or each one of us maybe. I don't know if anybody has a direct line with God.
Yeah.
But something is.
Why do we say levadcha if you have people implementing it?
That's what it is. This is my question.
The way I look at that, when we say levadcha, you alone, that means your will alone. It means that it's your vision, your will alone will be the one executed by whoever is in power. Okay? Let's assume that you work for a big company. Okay? So there is people like a CEO or whatever that has a vision and all that kind of stuff. And what you're asking is that my direct boss or whoever like in the chain is actually going to execute what is the vision and the expectations or whatever of the CEO. It's the same idea. Okay?
Hear you, but here in the pasuk Hashiva Shoten Kvarshona, indirectly we admit that something is wrong now.
Correct, absolutely. No, it's not that it's wrong now. We don't have that system at all. I mean, now we're in the modern state of Israel, so we have a system without getting into that. What's the quality of that system? But the point is that for so many years that we were in exile, we didn't have a system at all. So we're asking for a restoration of a system. And that's obviously is going to happen only after we're in the land of Israel, which is what we asked in the previous bracha. So now in the previous bracha, we asked to be in the land of Israel. Okay, fine, Mazel Tov, we're there. Now what? We have to establish government. We have to establish some sort of a system, right? So we're asking, make sure that whoever we appoint going to be people, the right people, the people who are going to govern in the right way. And what is the right way? It's to execute God's will.
Weird that they put that word instead of like some cow or something like that. You know, instead of saying, we will do what you are asking, instead of what you will.
No, but here's the thing. Everybody has a different interpretation of what God wants from them. That's not really practical. I feel that God wants this, and I feel that you can't run a country that way.
Depend on.
Right? It's got to be clear. Okay, and for that you need to have people who are in charge. Okay, there's got to be a clear law and whatever, and hopefully that what we're asking for is those who makes the laws, those who interpret the laws, those who execute the laws. All that's gonna be aligned with the will of correct. Okay, that's what we're asking for. Okay, yeah. What?
I think what you said, but still the way that the Hebrew is and the way that.
You're looking at from somebody who's like used to modern Hebrew. It's not exactly modern Hebrew.
Okay,
You gotta think a little bit
okay.
wider. Okay. We have a couple of terms here that we need to understand. Yagon va'anacha, right? Va'aser mimenu yagon va'anacha. And remove from us sorrow and sighing. What is, so here's the Gra interpret that, and he makes a difference. Anacha is a pain that comes from the outside, like an enemy or somebody that is, hates you or whatever that is. It's from the outside. Yagon, some sort of either pain or sadness or something that comes from the inside. Okay?
So there is one problem here, forgive me for interrupting. It should be the other way, Nachav Yagon from the end, because when you are being done by Yagon by somebody, then you have the Anacha.
But no, but Yagon is from you. It's from the
So actually after.
I get it, but the point is that most people, I think, are more concerned about what's outside, right? If I have an enemy, if I have something, whatever, I have issues with others, only then but I'm okay with the rest of with my own issues.
No, but you missed it. This sentence is also implanted in the. It's say that we add.
On Shabbat, correct. Then we have b'mishpat. So we have again two terms, tzedakah. Tzedakenu come from tzedakah or tzedek, right? Same root, and mishpat. What's the difference between them? So mishpat is the strict letter of the law. Okay, it's you have a law, there's an outcome. Okay, what's tzedakah? Tzedakah is the special circumstances. It's in spite of the fact that the law such and such, are more lenient, or actually more strict. Okay, and this is what the court very often does. Let's assume that somebody did something, whatever, I don't know, and the law says that the punishment is $100 fine. I'm just making this up. Okay, $100 fine, whatever that is. Okay, Terry doesn't like it. $1,000 fine. Okay, that's better. Whatever that is. But the court says the circumstances are that you already violated that already 10 times, and therefore we're going to send him to prison for 6 months, because obviously the monetary, it's not an issue for him. He already did. Okay, the law says $1,000. We're going to send him to 6 months in prison. Okay, so that's one. What's the or the court can say, you know what? Yes, the fine is $1,000, but this person been through years of abuse and whatever, and special circumstances, and I don't know whatever, all that kind of stuff, and therefore we're going to send him to therapy instead of. Okay, so the court can go either way, and this is what we're looking for. That God is going to reign over us with chesed and rachamim, with compassion, right? And v'tzadkeinu b'mishpat. So we're looking for tzedakah and mishpat. We need both elements, and when you have those both elements, we understand that that's what we need. We need God here, because first of all, you need two, because you can't just go with the letter of the law all the time. Okay, a society cannot sustain that way. That was, by the way, what's according to Chazal is midat Sdom. Midat Sdom is shali shali shalcha shalcha. Whatever, what's mine is mine. What's yours is yours. I don't need to show any flexibility towards you. I don't expect you to show any flexibility towards me. And so if the fine on that violation of the law is $1,000, it's going to be always $1,000, regardless to the circumstances. And it works both ways. So we're asking God for a system that has some sort of a balance between tzedakah and mishpat, and how we want that, and chesed and rachamim. How it's going to be executed is through chesed and rachamim, compassion and loving kindness.
Maybe I don't understand something.
Yes.
You can explain the prayer, by the way.
Yeah.
It started in the beginning, השיבה שותנו כבראשונה, ויוצאנו כבתחילה.
Yep.
Do we understand, or we have craving to something from before that now we don't have, or that now?
So
we
that's
have
exactly
it?
what. So I said we're. It's not necessarily to the past. We're asking for something that, yes, we don't have. Definitely at this time, and even today, our system is not perfect. And what we're asking is for the best state possible of the system.
We have this request, how would we recognize that whatever comes our way is the right thing?
When things are clicking, when things are good, you know.
It's the right thing right now.
Okay.
Hashem does not have rachamim on it?
No, the contrary.
Because we Shvat.
It's not. It's much more than that. God is defined by. Well, it's the day of judgment.
So it sounds like he's putting tzedakah aside.
No. What do we say? Utfilah tzedakah. מעבירים את רוע הגזירה. But when you go to court, when it's the day of judgment, it's about judgment. It's about justice first. Yes, there are going to be special circumstances. It's going to be part of the discussion. But you go to court not because of the tzedakah. Tzedakah, if you were appealing to the tzedakah, you need to do that before, right? This is in some sort of arbitrary whatever, some sort of a, when you come to court already, it's because you couldn't. But in its definition is to some extent it's the opposite, not really the opposite, but it's to some extent is a contradiction or an opposite to tzedakah. Tzedakah by nature is what? Compromise, some sort of a compromise.
This is why we said because it's a compromise.
It's not because it's a compromise, because tzedakah or tzedek, it all comes, you're actually touching about a different concept. It's interesting that tzedakah and tzedek comes from the same root. And in Judaism, that means even justice has to have this component of tzedakah, which means compromise. In other words, let's assume that whatever, we go to court for whatever that is. And I'm 100% right and you're 100% wrong. And the judge is going to rule in my favor. But still, the way it's going to be implemented, it has to be in a compassionate way. Yes, you're wrong, I'm right. It has to be somehow executed in a way that shows compassion. And so the two terms are very, very close in Judaism. And moreover, when you are asking for tzedakah, you're talking about the special circumstances or whatever, all that kind of stuff, that's by definition a form of compromise. Right? If I'm going to say, well, yes, the fine is $1,000, but he's going to spend time in therapy or whatever that is instead. It's not. No, I get it, but it's a compromise, right? Because you say, look, for the greater good, you got to look at the bigger picture. What is it that we're trying to do? We're trying to. What is just? No, just is that he'll pay the $1,000. That's just.
Maybe in that circumstance, just is helping this person.
Now you're taking, this is like the Jewish way. The Jewish way is right. And in English, there are two different terms, but in Hebrew, it's the same sholosh, which tells you that they're going to be connected. That the true justice is a form of tzedakah as well. Okay?
So where does that leave the person that's owed?
Well,
he's saying it's a fine.
It's a fine, like towards the state, for example. If it's like towards me and you, so
maybe you'd have to pay.
Let's assume that, like, under the circumstances, for example, whatever you need to pay me whatever the damage that you create to my car or whatever that is. But let's assume that it's also because you've done it so many times, now you gotta go to jail. I'm sorry, I don't know, Rabbi Puzi is calling me so many times. Okay, so just to summarize that, a society cannot exist without chesed, without rachamim, even if it has tzedek umishpat. And when we say at the end that the Chatima Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat, it means that God loves not only Tzedakah Mishpat, but also those, in the way I see it, when we say Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat, it's God loves also not only the concept of Tzedakah Mishpat, but also those who do Tzedakah Mishpat. Okay.
Because you have to do in order that somebody will benefit.
Correct. Correct. Okay. Fine. So now look about the also the process. So we got everybody to Israel. We established hopefully a good system in place, and then we move into the next blessing. And we say the following. So against informers, okay, this is like the way they, yes. Yeah, so we'll get there in a second. For the slanderers, let there be no hope, and may all wickedness perish in an instant. May all your people's enemies swiftly be cut down. May you swiftly uproot, crush, cut down, and humble the arrogant swiftly in our days. Blessed are you, Lord, who destroys enemies and humbles the arrogant. So we know for a fact that this is a blessing that was added later. This is why you ended up with 19 blessings, even though it's called Shmones, 18 blessings. It was established in Yavne in the time of Rabban Gamliel, after the destruction of the second temple. And the historic background for that, you had a lot of sects in Judaism, among them early Christians and stuff like that. And there was persecution against the Purushim, those who actually kept the Torah.
It's so weird because he actually kept the Torah. Why would we it's bizarre? And right.
Because you're Purush you isolated from the setting. You remove yourself from the setting. And the setting was like, Romans and whatever and all this. It's somehow connected to this idea of kedusha, meaning separate. So I separate myself. I remove myself from all that, the Romans, the whatever, the idol worshippers, the whatever, the people that have other practices, all that kind of stuff. I remove myself from all that stuff.
Because we're supposed to teach the rest of the world.
One small question about that. Were we the majority or the majority of the people who moved away from?
Majority was,
That went.
yeah. The Purushim were not the majority at that time. Now, so there are a lot of variations on that. If you look at different Sidurim, especially old Sidurim, so you have Lamalchinim, and sometimes it's Minim, and sometimes you're going to see Mishumadim. This is a blessing that you can see historic references to those times, whether it was the informers, at that time, or you had Mishumadim, or the people that converted, left Judaism or converted out, and and many times there was issues with them. Or Minim is somebody who yeah, but like Min is somebody who is yes. So even though, you can even perhaps today we don't have the informers, but the relevancy of this blessing is still very much so, because we still have enemies. We still have enemies. So the idea is to uproot the enemies the enemies from ourselves. By the way, there's an approach that with this bracha, we actually fulfill also another mitzvah in the Torah, which is Amalek. Because Amalek is not only a nation, it's ideology. And this is something that is relevant also today. And then we say, V'chol harisha kerega toved. Where this is coming from? This is so there's a story, very, very famous story in the Tractate of Brachot, on page 10a. The very famous story about Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was davening against somebody who was bugging him all the time. And his wife told him, don't do that. That's wrong. Rather, what you need to do, and she teaches him, like the pasuk says, it doesn't say itamu chot'im min haaretz, but chata'im min haaretz. It said like you need to pray for what? That sins or bad stuff, or not the sinners, but rather the sins will be abolished. And therefore, so you should not pray that the reshaim, the wicked people, will be lost, but rather that rish'ah. And by the way, therefore we say v'chol harish'ah kerega toved. We don't say v'chol hareshaim kerega yovedu. V'chol harish'ah, it's based on this idea, chol harish'ah.
Because when you say Reshaim, you,
Limited.
yeah, you limit
Okay.
it to a certain group of people or things. And this is for everything.
There's
But
a
practical.
Yeah.
The rich eye it's a concept.
That's what.
as a concept.
Good luck. Bad guys, they're in front of you. You can deal with them.
Yeah, but what we're asking, look, when you enter the world of tefillah, it's not the world of you ask for
Yes.
everything, right?
Yes.
So it's to some extent it's a world. I don't like to call it
Perfection.
perfection. Thank you. Perfection. So you ask for rish'ah to be abolished. Okay. And by the way, it's connected to another very important principle. By the way, in psychology, or anyone who dealt with kids knows that in psychology, we also talk about something like, when your kid does something wrong, or your spouse or whatever that is, don't say you, or say like, what you've done is wrong. Okay. Try to isolate the person from the act, because at the end of the day, right, it's like sometimes I see families in difficult times, and say you always, and I said, okay, you got to stop right there. You can't say you always do such a that. There's something specific. You talk like this thing that you do is blah 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 blah, because you don't want to talk about the person, him or herself. You want to talk about what they did. Definitely when it comes to kids. Same goes here. A person, we call him a wicked or whatever, it's because of the action, because we believe that every person was created in the image of God. Okay, circumstances led them to be mean. I get it. So, but let's try to separate the person from the act itself. By the way, it's connected to another concept that we have in Judaism, bin folo v'chal tismach. Even when your enemy falls, don't rejoice. We have a concept, of that, and the Talmud itself talks about this idea in different contexts. The Talmud talks about this idea of reciting Hallel on Pesach. And we shorten our Hallel. Why? Maaseh yadai tovim bayam v'atem omrim shira. God says, I get it. The Egyptians were cruel to you. I get it. But now they're dying. So you can't be rejoicing. By the way, we take, from the cup also at the Seder night, it's the same idea. Justice has to to prevail, yes, but it's wrong for me to rejoice when something like that happens. Correct.
We can rejoice evil is eradicated.
Correct. So according to the Gemara, this particular blessing was written by Shmuel HaKatan. That's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. And the story in the Talmud at least says that all the, they approached him because the humility that he had. Everybody felt that he is the right person to come up with the language for a particular bracha. And you can see that because he was so sensitive and he wrote Risha. By the way, in some of the Sidurim, you're going to say, V'chol osei Risha kerega yovedu. All those, the doers of evil. It's even like taking it even one step down, meaning to be even more, because Risha is a concept that exists in the world. I guess God wanted that to happen. Can we really daven to eradicate that as a concept? Maybe we should be a little bit more humble and ask that the people who do it, the doers of evil, should be eradicated. So there's like a lot of variations here on this in this bracha that you will see in throughout the generations, different in different sidurim. What? Interpretation, of course, and the understanding of that particular bracha. Okay, let's see if I have here something that I'm missing. And again, so you understand the progression. First, we need to be in Israel. Then we need to establish a system of government. And then only when you have that, you say, what? Let's take out the bad stuff. Let's take out the bad people out. Okay, this is all like step by step by step, how to get to ultimate goal. Yes.
Are people who get their jollies and are putting us down and what we do then?
No, they're not doing Hashem's will. They're doing it because they enjoy things.
Something like that, that they're particular.
I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's that even like that narrow. I like this idea of the whole harisha or the whole osei risha. Anyone who is evildoer. Why limit? Okay, so once you uproot the all the bad stuff, what can you do then? Then you can start building and tending and empowering the rest. Right? It's like when you have a teacher and you have like a kid that is like making you rough miserable. So what do you do eventually is say, okay, send them to the principal's office or something like that, because otherwise you can't teach, you can't do anything. It's destructive. So first you need to remove that kid, and then you can start, right? What? Yeah.
Gets down to why is he doing it?
Well, for sure, but you can't do that at this time. This is, you send him to the principal and let the principal deal with that, right? Or you sit down with the kid later on and try to figure out what's going on. Definitely, but I'm saying there's a process. I have a class to teach. right? And I can't teach my class if I have somebody who is disruptive all the time.
Somebody give all the answers. Like you won't, like someone you know.
I don't know. Okay, let's move to the next to the next blessing. To the next blessing. So after now we're asking for spiritual leadership. Okay, so what do we say? Allah Tzadikim, 122 at the top. To the righteous, the pious, the elders of your people, the house of Israel, the remnant of their scholars, the righteous converts, and to us, may your compassion be aroused. Lord our God, grant a good reward to all who sincerely trust in your name. Set our lot with them so that we may never be ashamed, for in you we trust. Blessed are you, Lord, who is support and trust of the righteous. We have an order here. We have the tzaddikim, chasidim, ziknei Israel, sofrehem, gerei tzedek, aleinu, right? So let's understand what that order, yes.
But this, to go back to the page before where it says, Hashiva Shoten Kover Shona. So what does it mean here on the Tzadikim?
Because the Shoftim and Yoatzim,
They have to be righteous.
maybe, but we're talking about like establishing a government, establishing a system of court, all that kind of stuff. Now we're talking about more of a spiritual and spirit. This is the very practical, secular, whatever you want to call it. Establishment of all institutions. This is spiritual. Yeah, you'll see in a second. Yes.
Somewhere, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
That we're talking about specifically the people who are spreading Judaism throughout the world and teaching people about Judaism. So whenever I see this, with this huge controversy of the Chabad Rebbe, this is where I see him as being one of these people, as opposed to.
I see that. I see that like it's a little bit too narrow in my view. It's a little bit too narrow. Tzaddikim and Hasidim and all that kind of stuff. They're not necessarily spreading Judaism. There are different ways to be, to find your. But let's see the progression in a second and understand. So the tzaddikim are the truly righteous. Do every tzaddikim. These are, by the way, this is the explanations of mine. This is Abu Draham. The Hasidim are the pious who go above and beyond. Above, I can't even read my own handwriting. Above and beyond the letter of the law, and do more than it is required. So you have the people that all they do, everything they do is for Shem Shamayim. Then you have like one level below that are the people that they're the pious people. They do way beyond the requirement, beyond the letter of the law, etc. Fine. Then you have Ziknei Israel, the elders, not in age, but wisdom. Okay. Correct. Sofreihem, the Sofrim, those who spend their lives teaching Torah to others. Okay. So perhaps, Terry, this is connected. Okay. So this is the Sofrim. Okay, good. Then we have the Gerei Tzedek, the converts, because they truly believe in the Torah. Nobody makes them. They are like, okay, and then ve'aleinu, us, everyday Jew, ordinary people. Okay? So, and then we say ve'sim chelkeinu mehem. How do we and so we how do we translate it? a lot with them, okay? And the question is, do I associate the tzaddikim, the Hasidim, Sofrim, Gerei HaTzedek? That's I think that's self to be associated with those people.
If you were spreading your knowledge so that we all understand, then certainly you're amongst us, and like, there is so many of us.
Maybe,
You
but
know,
I think that each one of us is doing that.
Teach people, about their Judaism so they can grow in their Judaism. So I think to a degree I'm also in there, and I think all of us, even if you're the.
No, but
person-
you take it to the practical aspect. I'm more theoretically, what do I think about myself? Do I think about myself as part of that chain or not?
Don't you?
To think that yes, and this is what I do. What I'm saying is this bracha actually inspires each one of us to do that.
Well, I to pretend I'm part of that.
Okay, even look, I'm in this is my job is in, let's call it, in the Jewish world, Jewish education, whatever you want to call it. Okay, but let's assume, okay, Daniel here, he's retired already, but was in banking, right, in finances. So you might say, well, my job is my job, but no. I think that what the bracha and Torah and Judaism in general wants us is to combine all those elements. Even in your business, you can inspire people. You can okay, teach people. Definitely, if you're a parent, okay. And then what we're asking, this is interesting. I think that we have a classic difference between you can say depends where you put the comma. What's the difference? So
So. And its focus is different.
what?
Its focus is different.
Correct.
It's like, let us be with them, and forever we should never be embarrassed by what we're doing.
Correct.
Let us always be with them, like forever. Let us not be embarrassed by what we do.
Right. So, and again, I've seen Sidurim this way, I've seen Sidurim this way, whatever, makes more sense to you. But this is why publishing a Sidur is so important. Thank God, like in recent generations, like the publisher are much more knowledgeable and they do research before, not always, by the way. They do research and all that kind of stuff, and they try to get, and most of the Sidurim today, why people start a new Siddur today? Because they go, oh, I've done research and I found like some stuff that is more accurate and whatever. Okay, it's got to be a reason why you put all this time and effort and money to do that. So usually there's they think about that stuff. That was not always the case throughout history. You see, it's a little comma, but it changes the meaning of the sentence. Yeah, the vav is going to be an outcome of where you put the comma, right? If you say leolam or uleolam lo nevo, so that's going to be, yeah. Okay, and since we're not talking about Torah, a vav could be added, or as especially. Yeah, for sure. But I'm saying it depends on how you interpret the text itself. Okay, now, so after we have a state and we have people in the state, the leaders and both on the political realm and whatever, and also in the spiritual, now we can daven for the capital. Let's start with Yerushalayim. So
Because the capital could be anywhere.
the capital could be anywhere, but David established the capital as Yerushalayim. That based on all sorts. Yeah, but that was not the capital. It was the place where the Mishkan was. We didn't have a capital. But for example, for a political reasons, most of the time that King David was a king, the capital was actually Hebron. But Hebron, he reigned in Hebron for 33 years, and in Yerushalayim only 7. No, you're right. 7 years in Hebron and then 33 in Yerushalayim. But you're right. But so you had another capital. Hebron was the capital before. And it was capital because what? Then it was established as Yerushalayim. Fine. So every day we mention and we daven for Yerushalayim, whether it's during Birkat Hamazon, we say it also in the Chuppah, and of course in Tfilah. We saw in Tfilat Arvit that we had the mentioning of Yerushalayim in the end of Ashkivenu on Shabbat. The Al Yerushalayim we end. In the Yotzer Or, we saw that the rabbis added this verse, Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir. There's all those mentioning of Yerushalayim. Okay, but in this particular bracha, okay, let's read it for a second. To Jerusalem, your city, may you return in compassion, and may you dwell in it as you're promised. May you rebuild it rapidly in our days as an everlasting structure, and install within it soon the throne of David. Blessed are you, Lord, who builds Jerusalem. We have 3 separate requests here. One is the return to Tzion, to Yerushalayim, and building the temple. The second is that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, will dwell there. And then number 3 is the monarchy. It's the kingship will return to Yerushalayim. Obviously, today things are a little bit different. So first of all, when we think about government, we don't think necessarily about monarchy. We think more about democracy, hopefully. Some people don't. And we have Yerushalayim. Just yesterday we celebrated Yom Yerushalayim, right? So we have Yerushalayim. What does it mean, rebuild Yerushalayim? Years ago, I wrote like something about that. It's a question. Today, Jerusalem is rebuilt much more than any other time in history. You know, is it like, you know, building the city itself, or perhaps rebuild, consider that the city is not built, fine. Or another opinion is it has to do with Hasharat Shekhinah, with specifically that divine presence dwell in that city, with or without the temple. So you can take it either way that you want. What? The Rambam was very clear, for example, that there is a Hasharat Shekhinah in Har HaBayit, regardless, even after the destruction of the temple. Kedushat Har HaBayit omedet. I'm sorry? Even today, according to the Rambam, yes, even today.
Before you go up, and you know,
If you're allowed even to go up, which is a whole discussion by itself. Okay. We just a second. Yerushalayim comes from word is comes from yirah, right? According to tradition, obviously we associate with Har Moriah, the binding of Isaac, as the pasuk says, "Behar Hashem Yera'eh." So yirah o comes from yera'eh, will be seen, meaning when we say yirah o from God is a outcome of re'iyah, of seeing. So you can fear of God only when you have experienced God, you've seen God, whatever that means.
Special sight, special.
Whatever that means, whatever that means. According to the Tractate of Megillah on page 29, wherever the Jews went, and this is based on those who spent time with me on Yechezkel, know that wherever the Jews went, Galta Shechina Imam, right? So remember when Yechezkel is describing the Shechina leaving Harabait and leaving Yerushalayim and leaving Eretz Israel, it's to say that they went with the Jewish people to the Golah, to Bavel. And so when we ask for the return of the Shechina to Yerushalayim, it means it's also the return of the people to Yerushalayim. Okay? And we need to ask ourselves, what do we feel about, towards that city? A lot of, forget about, it's not only the institution, but overall, I think it's a beautiful thing. Overall, across the Jewish people, all the non-options to put their schools in Yerushalayim, whether it's HUC, the Reform, JTS, Conservative, and of course, Hechal Shlomo or whatever, in Yerushalayim. I think it's beyond the discussion. Definitely also.
Maybe they wanted to be part of it.
Of course, but that's what I'm saying. Like I think that everybody feel that that's that. Now, there's a discussion. There's a discussion among the scholars about the name Shmoneh Esrei, etc. So one approach is, yes, it was 18 blessings, and therefore, and later on it was added, as we said, it was added later on, it became 19, but the name remained. There's another theory, okay? And that theory says, no, the name of Shmoneh Esrei was established later on. That means, in the beginning, there was, meaning that the name was established after the composition of Birkat Velamal Shenim Al Tikva.
And why is it on?
But it was only one bracha of Binyan Yerushalayim and the next one, Malchut Beit David. Those two were one bracha that later on split into two. I spoke about that in one of the shiurim that I gave. Whether this way or that way, we ended up with 19. But the point is that if you look, okay, let's read the 124 at the top. May the offshoot of your servant David soon flower, and may his pride be raised high by your salvation. For we wait for your salvation all day. Blessed are you, Lord, who makes the glory of salvation flourish. You understand that there's a lot of repetition between this bracha and the previous one, right? V'chiseh David mehera letochat achin, when we say, right, and install with it soon the throne of David. It's exactly what we say. Okay, so this is based on a bunch of versions in the Yerushalmi that claim that theory claims that was originally one bracha that was later on separated into two. What is going on in this bracha? Quickly, because we'll try. So we're talking about, just a second, the coming of, technically, I guess it's Mashiach, right? The servant David, okay? It's Tzemach David, okay? It's Malchut Bei David, and Mashiach is not necessarily this guy is gonna show up on a donkey, but it represents the continuation. It represents that Davidic. It's not only the Emunah, it's the Davidic lineage, but it's not. I would say it's not necessarily even like the Davidic lineage, like biologically, okay, but perhaps spiritually, okay. Why this is so important? Because the Mashiach represents this balance between political leadership and spiritual religious leadership. And that's what we're asking for. We're asking for that state in which there's equilibrium between those two. We're not there yet, but we're asking. Now, we say just as that, Et tzemach David avdecha tatzmiach. So why specifically tzemach? Tzemach is a flower or a plant. Because it reminds us exactly. It reminds us the imagery is of plants or flowers, because what they do, they grow. The process, the image is of growth, continuous growth, a process. It's not a one-time thing. And this is how we see also the growth of the nation. Slowly. It's a process, a continuous process. And then we say, Ki lishuatcha kivinu kol hayom. And for me, I'm asking myself, try to, while reciting that line, you remember, like my shtick is like, I'm asking, what's the call to action in every bracha? So here is, what can I do to help that process, to bring that process? Ki lishuatcha kivinu kol hayom. What does it mean for me to hope? Okay, what does it mean? Where this is coming from? What's the background for that? You probably know that there's a very, very famous Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, page 31a. It says the following: Rava says that after 120, when you get to Shamayim, there are a series of questions, right? And what is the one of the questions? Tzipita ekivita lishua. No, the Talmud doesn't talk about Mashiach. It talks about Yeshua, redemption. Okay? Did you anticipate? Did you hope for redemption? Okay, honest in business, you know, whatever, all that kind of stuff. But did you anticipate redemption? And here, what I'm thinking, by the way, is that what the text of the bracha is actually teaching us, it's that the way and the trajectory is more important than the outcome here. The process. You know, we're interesting both. You know, I remember saying it. Look, when you have a student that, for example, got a 90 in a test, and then the next test they got a 95, that's amazing, that's great. However, when you have a student that got 50 in the first test, and then they scored 65 in the next test, that's a much bigger achievement. So it's less about the outcome, it's more about the process. Now, Now, in all the blessings, we ask God something. But here, because God is the one that provides whatever we need. However, here, it's on us. Kivinu, because we hope. Ki lishuatcha kivinu kol hayom. The active, the verb, kaveh, becomes it's kivinu, it's on us. So it's almost to say that the fulfillment of this bracha lies within each of us. We have the power through our hope, through our, how they translate it? Wait, through our, whatever, to create the fulfillment of this bracha. So, and I owe you one last explanation. Then, if you remember, a couple of minutes ago, I said that according to some, this bracha was one bracha with the previous one, with Yerushalayim Echa, and then they got separated. So the question is, why they got separated, right? So Soloveitchik actually explains that in order to maintain our identity against other religions, where the Messiah already arrived, early Christianity, etc., there was a need to emphasize this idea of tzipiyah lishua. We had to emphasize this idea that we're still waiting for the Messiah. He has not yet arrived. And therefore, if that becomes the focal point of this of the bracha, it has to be a separate bracha and separated from the rebuild of Yerushalayim. Because if it's just like part of the rebuild of Yerushalayim, it's not enough of a clear message. And when you want to separate yourself from especially early Christianity at that time, then they felt that they need to create it into one bracha that says, okay, this is about Yerushalayim, this is about the Mashiach, and the Mashiach, we're still waiting for him. We're not there yet.
Not coming in a donkey.
Probably not coming on a donkey, but
I was in high school and we were approaching learning about Shabbat Tzvi.
yeah.
I remember the teacher introducing this as, so if somebody with a long beard came riding on a white donkey down 13th Avenue, they would say he was Mashiach. Would you believe them?
Well, the Rambam has a very, very clear approach to that. By the way, the Rambam talks about it, and the Rambam lists several conditions that must happen until you believe that person and consider that person as a Mashiach or not. That is not one of the Rambam's requirements, but you need to understand why it was because of personalities like Shabtai Tzvi, and it's so difficult. Even Rabbi Akiva himself was mistaken there. He thought that Bar Kochba is the Mashiach. So if Rabbi Akiva was, made a mistake here, it's so easy. It's because, when you want something so much, I'm not going to say anything about Chabad, but I'm not going to say anything about Chabad, but when you want something so much, sometimes it clouds your vision or you clouds your judgment. And this is why the Rambam, who was the most rational of our Chachamim, wrote it very, very clearly. It's got to be a whole set of conditions, and you put them to the test, and that's what has to happen. Oh, I'm sure.
It's got to be a lot.
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. Okay, next time